They served me garbage while they ate $185 steaks at my own anniversary party. Cold chunks of fat and gristle on a plastic plate. Scraps that any decent kitchen throws away. My daughter-in-law Rachel smiled as she set it down. Don't waste food, Chuck. These bits are still good protein for someone your age. 200 people watched me eat rejected meat while my family celebrated at the head table. Business partners I'd known for decades. Employees who'd trusted me for years. All witnessing my children feed their father like a dog. I'd given them everything. Paid for their college educations, their house down payments, their comfortable salaries. For 40 years, I'd built Morrison's family kitchen from a $3,000 loan into a restaurant empire worth millions. My name is Charles Morrison, and I thought family meant loyalty. I was wrong, but they made one crucial mistake that night. They forgot who actually owned everything they thought they'd inherit. The taste of humiliation in my mouth would cost them everything they'd taken for granted. What happened next? Well, let me know where you're listening from. I love hearing from people who understand what real family should look like. And if stories about quiet justice interest you, you'll want to subscribe because this is just at the beginning. Let me take you back to where this all started. I promised I'd build a legacy for my children and grandchildren. 40 years ago, I borrowed $3,000 from my brother-in-law to open Morrison's family kitchen. Just a small diner on Route 9, 24 seats and a dream. My wife Patricia worked the register while I manned the grill. 16-hour days, 7 days a week. My hands developed permanent calluses from flipping burgers and scrubbing pans. The first year, we lived on ramen noodles and hope. Patricia wore the same 3 dresses to church, rotating them so people wouldn't notice we couldn't afford new clothes. But every penny we saved went back into the business. Better equipment, fresh ingredients, building something that would last. But I had a philosophy that kept me going through those lean years. Food brings families together. Every meal should feel like coming home. I built that first restaurant into 5 locations across 3 counties. Morrison's Family Kitchen became the place where 3 generations celebrated birthdays, anniversaries, and graduations. We weren't just serving food, we were creating memories for families who trusted us with their special moments. Through it all, I was raising Kevin and Jennifer, teaching them about hard work, about treating customers like family. This will all be yours someday, I'd tell them while showing them how to balance the books or handle difficult suppliers. Those early signs were there, but I chose to ignore them. When Patricia died 8 years ago, I needed my children more than ever. The funeral home was packed with customers who'd become friends over the decades. Mrs. Henderson from the bank brought homemade cookies. The Martinez family, who'd celebrated every birthday at Morrison's for 15 years, sent flowers that filled half the chapel. But Kevin and Jennifer? Too busy with their own lives to help plan their mother's service. Dad, we're dealing with our own grief, Kevin said when I asked for help with the memorial arrangements. Maybe hire a funeral director to handle the details. Jennifer nodded in agreement. It's too much for us right now. You understand? I understood that my children couldn't spare 3 days to honor the woman who'd raised them. But I told myself they were just overwhelmed. Grief affects people differently. They'd come around once the shock wore off. Instead, they saw my vulnerability as opportunity. After Patricia's death, Kevin and Jennifer became more involved in business decisions. Kevin's wife, Rachel, had opinions about everything. Chuck needs to modernize, she'd say during our monthly family dinners. These old-school methods are hurting profits in today's market. Jennifer's husband, Brad, would nod along eagerly. The industry has changed dramatically, Chuck. Maybe it's time to consider some serious retirement planning. I wanted to trust them. I wanted to believe that they cared about preserving what Patricia and I had built together, so I gave them management roles. I thought I was preparing them for leadership, but I was signing my own exile papers. Kevin became operations manager with a $75,000 salary. Jennifer handled marketing and customer relations at $65,000 annually. Both salaries I paid from business profits that Patricia and I had earned through decades of sacrifice. They started small with their power grabs, excluding me from vendor meetings with suppliers I'd worked with for 20 years. Dad, these conversations get technical, Kevin would explain. We don't want to bore you with operational details. Rachel redecorated my office without asking permission. She threw away Patricia's picture and the handwritten thank you notes from customers I'd saved for decades. This space needs to reflect modern management, she announced when I found my memories in the dumpster. Your management style is outdated, Dad, Jennifer told me one afternoon after I questioned a menu change. Customers expect different things now. You have to adapt or become irrelevant. The words hit harder than any physical blow could have, but I kept telling myself they were just ambitious. Young people in a hurry to make their mark on the family business. I convinced myself that their impatience was normal, that they'd learn to appreciate tradition and experience eventually. I didn't realize they were already planning my complete exit from the company I'd built. From slowly, I began feeling like a guest in the company I'd built with my bare hands. Slowly, I started feeling like an unwelcome guest in my own business. The disrespect escalated gradually, so I didn't recognize it as a coordinated campaign at first. Kevin would suggest I should step back from day-to-day operations and enjoy my golden years. And important emails about vendor contracts and staff changes would go to everyone except me. Rachel started treating me like a confused old man who'd forgotten how to run a business. Chuck, maybe you should let us handle the complex financial decisions, she'd say with that patronizing smile I'd grown to hate. The breaking point came when I arrived for a staff meeting and found my parking space, the one marked owner that I'd used for 15 years, had been repainted to say visitor. It's more welcoming to customers, Jennifer explained when I confronted her about it. We thought you'd appreciate the change. But what hurt most was watching my grandchildren absorb these lessons about disrespecting their elders. Emma, 16 years old, started rolling her eyes when I told stories about the early days. Mason, 14, would groan when I tried to teach him about customer service. Grandpa, that's so old-fashioned, Emma said when I explained why we handwrote thank you notes to loyal customers. Everything's digital now. They were learning that experience had no value, that age meant irrelevance, that the person who'd built their comfortable lives deserved no respect for his sacrifices. At that moment, I realized my children weren't just planning to push me out of the business. They were teaching my grandchildren to discard me entirely. Then came the financial pressure disguised as family emergencies. Kevin needed a salary advancement of $20,000 for Rachel's new BMW payments. It's about professional image, Dad. Customers judge us by what we drive. Jennifer required an emergency loan of $35,000 for Brad's consulting business venture. It's practically guaranteed income, Dad. We'll pay you back with interest. Every request came with subtle threats about my advancing age and supposedly declining judgment. We're just looking out for your best interests, they'd say when I hesitated to hand over money I'd worked decades to earn. Rachel started dropping hints about updating my estate planning. Brad asked increasingly pointed questions about succession timelines and asset protection strategies. They circled me like vultures, measuring my coffin while I was still breathing and working. But what I discovered next shattered any remaining illusions about family loyalty. I was returning to the office late one Tuesday evening to review the monthly food cost reports when I heard voices from the conference room. The door was cracked open just slightly, and Jennifer's voice carried clearly down the hallway. We need to get Dad declared incompetent, she was saying to Kevin. The business is worth at least $2.8 million, according to the appraisal Brad commissioned. We just need the right medical evaluation and some documented evidence of cognitive decline. I stood frozen in that hallway, my hand still on the doorknob to my own office, unable to believe what my ears were telling me. My own children were plotting to steal my life's work by claiming I was mentally unfit. I stood in that hallway, listening to my children plan my destruction. Kevin's voice joined the conversation. The anniversary party is perfect timing. 200 witnesses, including business leaders and city officials. If we can demonstrate his incompetence publicly, we'll have plenty of support for a competency hearing. Rachel's voice carried through the door next. I've been documenting his forgetfulness and confusion for months. Little things, but they add up to a pattern. My blood ran cold. What forgetfulness? What confusion? I ran 5 successful restaurants and handled complex financial decisions every day without assistance. But apparently, normal human moments, forgetting a customer's name or misplacing reading glasses, were being weaponized against me. "What about the seating arrangement?" Brad asked, his voice eager with anticipation. "We've arranged everything perfectly," Jennifer replied. "VIP section for real decision makers and business partners. Dad gets a corner table with part-time employees and their families. That way, everyone can see he's not really in charge anymore." "And dinner?" Kevin asked. Rachel's laugh was sharp and cruel. "I've prepared something special for his meal. Let's see how he handles eating what he actually deserves, after 40 years of acting like he built this empire single-handedly." They laughed together, actually laughed about humiliating their father in front of the community he'd served faithfully for 4 decades. That moment, standing in my own hallway listening to my children plot against me, I realized I wasn't dealing with family anymore. I was dealing with enemies who shared my DNA. I decided to play by their rules and document everything they said. The next morning, I purchased a small digital recording device from the electronics store downtown. Not for legal purposes initially, just to convince myself I wasn't imagining the conspiracy growing around me. Within a week, I had hours of evidence that my children saw me as an obstacle to overcome, rather than a father to respect. Rachel explaining to her book club over lunch at Morrison's, "Chuck's really losing it mentally. We're basically running the entire business already, while he wanders around thinking he's still relevant." Kevin telling our longtime accountant, "Dad doesn't understand modern financial management anymore. We need to protect the company assets from his impulsive decision-making." Jennifer discussing strategy with Brad over dinner at our main location. "The 40th anniversary party will be perfect. We'll demonstrate his incompetence to everyone who matters, then move forward with guardianship proceedings." Each recorded word felt like a nail being driven into my heart. But the most damaging conversation happened 3 days before the anniversary party. I was reviewing weekly sales reports in my office when my phone rang. Jennifer had called Kevin on speaker, apparently not knowing I was still in the building after hours. "The guest list is finalized," Jennifer said. 200 confirmed attendees, including our biggest business partners, restaurant association members, and 3 city council people. Perfect audience to show everyone that Dad's lost his edge." "What about the seating arrangements?" Kevin asked, his excitement barely contained. That's when I learned exactly how far they were willing to go. "We've arranged a separate VP section for the actual decision makers," Jennifer continued, unaware that their father was recording every word. "Dad gets a corner table near the kitchen with the busboys and part-time servers. That way, everyone can see where he really fits in the hierarchy now." Rachel's voice joined the conference call with undisguised glee. "And I've prepared something extra special for his dinner. Instead of the Wagyu steaks everyone else will be eating, Chuck gets the scraps. The fatty pieces, the gristle, the burned edges that any decent kitchen would throw away." My hands started shaking as I held the recording device. "You're going to feed him garbage?" Kevin asked, sounding more excited than horrified. "Table scraps," Rachel confirmed. "On a plastic plate, not our good china. I want everyone to see exactly how we value his contribution to this family business." They laughed together at the image of my public humiliation. My own children and their spouses, planning to degrade me in front of the entire community that had watched me build Morrison's family kitchen from nothing. "This is brilliant," Brad added. "By the end of the evening, everyone will understand that Kevin and Jennifer are the real leaders. Chuck will just be the confused old man who used to own restaurants." The recording captured 38 minutes of detailed planning for my professional and personal destruction. Every cruel detail, every calculated humiliation, every laugh at my expense. That night, I realized my children had declared war on me. It was time to remind them who actually owned the weapons in this fight. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat in my study surrounded by the documents that would determine my family's future. The stock certificates told the real story of Morrison's family kitchen. I owned 89% of the company's shares. Kevin and Jennifer each held 5.5%. Gifts I'd given them on their 30th birthdays. Tokens of love they now interpreted as down payments on everything else. Property deeds for all 5 restaurant locations were in my name alone. Patricia and I had bought each piece of real estate carefully, always keeping ownership clear and unencumbered. Kevin and Jennifer had management roles and comfortable salaries, but they owned nothing beyond those small shareholdings. Business bank accounts, equipment leases, vendor contracts, insurance policies, everything that mattered carried my signature alone. They thought they were demonstrating my powerlessness at the anniversary party. Instead, they were handing me the motivation I'd been lacking to use the power I'd always possessed. The recording device sat on my desk next to the legal documents. 38 minutes of their conspiracy to humiliate and destroy me. Their laughter at my anticipated suffering. Their casual planning of my public degradation. At 3 a.m., I made a decision that would change all our lives forever. At dawn, I called my attorney, Gerald Whitman, and scheduled an emergency appointment for that morning. It was time to remind Kevin and Jennifer about the difference between managing something and actually owning it. Gerald Whitman had been my attorney for 15 years, a careful and methodical man who understood the difference between emotional reactions and legal strategy. His office walls displayed certificates and degrees that spoke to his competence in estate planning and business law. "I need a comprehensive mental competency evaluation," I told him during our 8 a.m. meeting, "and I need it documented by someone whose credentials can't be challenged in any court proceeding." Gerald raised an eyebrow, but asked no unnecessary questions. That's why I trusted him. Within 2 hours, I was sitting across from Dr. Patricia Henderson, a neuropsychologist whose qualifications were impeccable and whose practice specialized in competency evaluations for estate planning purposes. She put me through 3 intensive hours of cognitive testing, memory assessment across multiple categories, problem-solving abilities under time pressure, mental acuity measurements compared to national standards for my age group. The results were decisive. "Mr. Morrison," she said as we concluded the evaluation, "your cognitive function is not just adequate for your age, it's excellent. I see no indication of dementia, senility, or any other condition that would impair your decision-making abilities. Your memory, reasoning skills, and judgment are all within the top 15% for men in your age demographic." Her written report would be 12 pages of clinical documentation proving that my mind was sharper than most people half my age. Back in Gerald's office, we began drafting a new will, not from anger or spite, but from clarity about my values and who deserved to benefit from my life's work. The process felt like taking back control of my own story. Each signature on those legal documents was a step toward reclaiming my dignity. The new will reflected my values, not my biology. The Riverside Homeless Foundation would receive the bulk of my estate. People who understood that every meal was a gift, not a right. They fed families who appreciated kindness and never took generosity for granted. Kevin and Jennifer would each receive exactly $1 from their father's legacy. The memo line on their inheritance checks would read simply, "For scraps." But changing my will was only the beginning. While my children continued plotting my downfall, I was systematically dismantling every assumption they'd made about their financial future. Gerald connected me with Thomas Chen, a business broker who specialized in restaurant chains. His evaluation of Morrison's family kitchen came back higher than I'd expected. $2.9 million for all 5 locations, equipment, brand recognition, and customer loyalty. Within days, I had a serious buyer, Family First Dining, a regional chain that had been watching Morrison's success for years. They offered full asking price with one condition: they would maintain our recipes, keep our staff, and preserve the family-friendly atmosphere that had made us successful. It felt right. The restaurants would continue serving families and creating memories. Employees would keep their jobs under new ownership that valued what we'd built. The Morrison legacy of good food and genuine hospitality would survive. But Morrison Family Control would not. I signed the sale agreement on a Tuesday morning while Kevin and Jennifer attended a restaurant industry conference in Chicago, learning new ways to modernize Dad's outdated business model. They had no idea I was transferring everything to people who actually respected our success. They were attending seminars on taking control while I was signing away everything they thought belonged to them. The business bank accounts required only my signature to close. After all, I was the legal owner of every asset they'd been treating like their inheritance. 40 years of profits, carefully saved and invested, moved into my personal accounts within hours. Kevin and Jennifer's employment contracts contained clauses I'd forgotten about until Gerald reminded me. Either party could terminate the arrangement with 30 days written notice. I drafted their termination letters that afternoon, effective the day after the restaurant sale closed. They'd spent months planning to push me out of my own company. Instead, they'd be cleaning out desks they'd never legally owned. But the most liberating decision was selling my house. Not from spite, but from the realization that I wanted something completely different from my remaining years. A young couple with 2 small children made an offer within hours of the listing going live. They loved the big kitchen in the backyard that would be perfect for swing sets and birthday parties. Patricia would have approved. She always said houses were meant for growing families, not lonely widowers rattling around in too much empty space. I donated most of the furniture to the women's shelter downtown. Patricia's professional clothing went to families who needed proper attire for job interviews. Her jewelry became engagement rings for young couples who couldn't afford new ones. I kept only her wedding ring, one family photo from before the bitterness began, and the plastic plate from the anniversary party. That plate deserved a place of honor in my new life. My apartment near the Riverside Homeless Foundation was small, clean, and perfectly suited for a man who'd learned the difference between having possessions and having peace. For the first time in years, I felt genuinely useful and appreciated. Volunteering at the foundation showed me what real gratitude looked like. When I taught cooking classes in their community kitchen, people paid attention because they wanted to learn skills that would help them build better lives. When I shared stories about building a business from nothing, they listened because hope and practical advice mattered to them. Nobody questioned my competence or suggested I was too old to contribute something valuable. Maria, a young volunteer coordinator who'd grown up in foster care, treated me with the respect my own children had abandoned. "You're like the father I never had," she told me one afternoon while we prepared dinner for 60 residents. "You actually listen to my ideas and make me feel like they matter." These people understood that every meal was a gift to be grateful for. Every kind word was precious. Every skill shared was an investment in someone's potential future. I was building real relationships based on mutual respect rather than blood obligations or an inheritance expectations. The final legal step was signing my completed will in Gerald's office, with 2 witnesses who had no connection to my family. Maria and Frank, the foundation's director, watched me sign the document that would give my life's work to people who fed the hungry instead of people who'd fed me garbage. "Are you certain about these decisions, Mr. Morrison?" Gerald asked, as attorneys must. "I've never been more certain of anything in my life." The 40th anniversary party arrived with perfect timing for my children's planned humiliation. The Riverside Grand Ballroom looked magnificent that Saturday evening. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over tables dressed in white linen and fresh flowers. 200 guests mingled over cocktails, sharing fond memories of Morrison's family kitchen and the man who'd built it from nothing. I'd spent hours preparing a heartfelt speech, a genuine thank you to the community that had supported our family business for 4 decades, recognition for employees who'd become family over the years, and yes, pride in my children, who I'd believed would carry our legacy forward with honor. Kevin and Jennifer had insisted on handling every arrangement. "Just show up and enjoy yourself, Dad," Jennifer had said with what I now recognized as false sweetness. "This is your night to be celebrated." The seating arrangement told the real story. They placed me at table 12, tucked in a corner near the kitchen doors, where the constant movement of servers created noise and distraction. The head table, where I'd assumed I would sit with my family to receive congratulations, was reserved for key business partners and future leaders. I watched Kevin make opening remarks to the crowd, his voice carrying across the room with practiced authority. Tonight we celebrate not just Morrison's family kitchen's past, but our exciting vision for taking this legacy into the future, he announced. Polite applause filled the elegant ballroom. Then the dinner service began. Table by table, servers delivered perfectly prepared Wagyu steaks with roasted vegetables and truffle butter. The aroma was intoxicating. I'd selected this premium menu myself, wanting to showcase our kitchen's capabilities to the community leaders who'd supported us for decades. But no plate came to my table. Instead, Rachel approached with something that would change everything between us forever. The smell of cold grease and congealed fat hit me before I could see what was on the plate. Rachel was smiling as she approached my table, carrying what looked like kitchen scraps on a cheap plastic plate. Chunks of fatty gristle and burned edges that had been cut away from other guests' steaks. Pieces of meat that any respectable kitchen would scrape into the garbage disposal. "Here you go, Chuck," she said loudly enough for surrounding tables to hear every word. "These are still good protein for someone your age. We shouldn't waste food, right?" The plastic plate landed in front of me with a hollow sound that echoed through my chest. Around me, other guests were cutting into beautiful medium-rare steaks that cost $185 per person. I was staring at table scraps that wouldn't be fit for a stray dog. "Don't be wasteful," Rachel continued, her voice dripping with false concern. "These bits are perfectly good for you to enjoy." Kevin nodded approvingly from the head table, not even trying to hide his satisfied smile. Jennifer raised her wine glass in what appeared to be a toast to my public humiliation. The conversations around me had stopped completely. People were staring, trying to understand why the guest of honor was being fed garbage, while everyone else enjoyed a feast. Some looked embarrassed for me. Others seemed confused about whether this was some kind of twisted family joke. But I knew exactly what this was. This was my children teaching me my place in their version of the family hierarchy. The recording device in my jacket pocket captured every humiliating word as I picked up my fork. 200 people watched me take the first bite of cold, fatty meat, the taste of betrayal coating my throat like shame made solid. I forced myself to swallow each piece of gristle, feeling it stick in my throat like solidified humiliation. The taste was worse than I'd imagined, greasy and cold and bitter with the knowledge of how far my own children were willing to go to break me down in public. But with each humiliating bite, something unexpected was happening in my mind. My thinking was becoming clearer, calmer. The hurt was transforming into something far more dangerous for them, pure, calculated determination. I was no longer feeling sorry for myself. I was planning their futures. The recording device captured everything. Rachel's comments about not wasting food, the murmurs of shocked guests around me, Kevin's satisfied chuckles from across the room as he watched his father eat garbage. More importantly, I was remembering the numbers that would determine all our fates. I owned 89% of Morrison's family kitchen's shares. Kevin and Jennifer each held 5.5% that I'd gifted them years ago. Every property deed was in my name alone. Every bank account, every business loan, every supplier contract bore my signature. They thought they were demonstrating my powerlessness to the entire community. Instead, they were handing me the motivation I'd been lacking to use the power I'd always possessed but had been too loving to exercise. When I finished the last piece of fatty gristle, I wiped my mouth with the paper napkin Rachel had thoughtfully provided. No linen for the old man, apparently. Then I stood up to give the thank you speech I'd prepared for this celebration of my life's work. But Kevin had other plans for the evening's entertainment. "Actually, Dad," he called out, his voice cutting across the ballroom's conversations, "maybe we should handle the remarks tonight." The room fell completely silent. "Dad's getting pretty senile these days," Kevin announced to the entire room, his voice carrying to every corner of the ballroom. The words hit like a physical assault. 200 faces turned toward me, some shocked, others uncomfortable, all witnessing my public execution. Business partners I'd known for decades shifted nervously in their seats. Employees who'd trusted my leadership for years looked confused and embarrassed. Jennifer stood up beside her brother, her face glowing with apparent concern that I now recognized as carefully rehearsed cruelty. We're taking over all business decisions now. Someone needs to make the real choices around here. She gestured towards my table, toward the plastic plate with its remnants of scraps and grease. Dad, why don't you just enjoy your dinner? The laughter from the head table cut through my soul like broken glass. Rachel, Brad, Kevin, Jennifer, four people who owed everything to my decades of sacrifice, publicly declaring me incompetent and unworthy of basic respect. Brad raised his wine glass with theatrical flourish. Maybe it's time Dad learned his place in this family business. More laughter erupted from their table. Some guests joined in, probably thinking this was some kind of roast or family tradition they didn't understand. Others looked deeply uncomfortable, recognizing cruelty when they witnessed it firsthand. I stood there holding my paper napkin, feeling the weight of every eye in the room. My throat was still coated with the taste of cold fat and betrayal. My hands were trembling slightly, though whether from rage or humiliation, I couldn't determine. The recording device captured every word, every laugh, every moment of my complete degradation before the community I'd served faithfully for 40 years. But instead of feeling defeated, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Perfect, ice-cold clarity about who these people really were and what they deserved from me. Put yourself in my position for a moment. You've just discovered your own children plotting against you. What would you do? Fight back immediately or plan carefully? Let me know your thoughts, because what I did next surprised even me. I sat back down without saying a word and started planning their destruction. That night changed everything in my mind and heart. At 3 a.m., I was sitting in my study staring at family photos on the wall. Patricia smiling at Kevin's college graduation, Jennifer's wedding day, when she'd promised to honor family bonds, grandchildren blowing out birthday candles at Morrison's family kitchen, back when they still looked at me with love instead of calculation. The taste of humiliation was still coating my mouth like a poison that wouldn't wash away. But for the first time in months, my thinking was absolutely crystal clear. The hurt was being systematically replaced by something far more powerful: unwavering determination to take back control of my life and legacy. I opened my desk drawer and pulled out the business documents I'd filed away years ago. Stock certificates showing my 89% ownership of everything they thought they'd inherit. Property deeds for all 5 restaurant locations, every square foot legally mine. Bank account statements showing assets that Kevin and Jennifer apparently believed they already owned. They had management titles and comfortable salaries. They lived in houses I'd helped finance and drove cars I'd helped purchase. But they owned virtually nothing of substance. The recording device sat on my desk next to those legal papers. 38 minutes of their conspiracy to destroy me. Their laughter at my public humiliation. Their casual cruelty toward the man who'd sacrificed everything to give them comfortable lives. I realized I still held every important card in this deadly game they'd started. At dawn, I began executing a plan that would teach them the true meaning of consequences. Gerald Whitman was in his office by 7 a.m., as always. A careful, methodical attorney who understood the difference between emotional revenge and legal justice. His office walls displayed the credentials that had guided my family's legal affairs for 15 years. I need a comprehensive mental competency evaluation, I told him during our emergency meeting, and I need it documented by someone whose qualifications can never be challenged in any legal proceeding. Gerald asked no unnecessary questions. That's why I'd trusted him with my family's most important matters for over a decade. Within 2 hours, I was sitting across from Dr. Patricia Henderson, a neuropsychologist whose credentials were beyond reproach and whose practice specialized in competency evaluations for estate planning. She put me through 4 intensive hours of cognitive testing, memory assessments across multiple categories and timeframes, problem-solving abilities under measured time pressure, mental acuity measurements compared to national standards for my age demographic. The results were better than I'd hoped. "Mr. Morrison," she said as we concluded the comprehensive evaluation, Your cognitive function isn't just adequate for your age, it's genuinely excellent. I see no indication whatsoever of dementia, senility, or any other condition that would impair your decision-making abilities. Your memory, reasoning skills, and judgment all score within the top 15% for men in your age group. And her written report would be 15 pages of clinical documentation proving that my mind was sharper than most people half my age. Back in Gerald's office, we began drafting the new will that would reflect my true values rather than my biological obligations. Every signature on those legal documents felt like reclaiming my stolen dignity. The new will reflected what I'd learned about family, respect, and who truly deserved to benefit from my life's work. The Riverside Homeless Foundation would receive the bulk of my estate. People who understood that every meal was a precious gift, not an entitlement to be taken for granted. Kevin and Jennifer would each receive exactly $1 from their father's legacy. The memo line on their inheritance checks would read, "For scraps." But changing my will was only the first step in a comprehensive plan. While my children continued plotting my professional destruction, I was methodically dismantling every assumption they'd made about their financial future. Gerald connected me with Thomas Chen, a business broker who specialized in restaurant acquisitions. His professional evaluation of Morrison's family kitchen came back higher than my most optimistic projections. $2.9 million for all 5 locations, equipment, brand recognition, and 4 decades of customer loyalty. Within a week, I had multiple serious buyers. Family First Dining, a respected regional chain, offered full asking price with one important condition. They would maintain our recipes, keep our dedicated staff, and preserve the family-friendly atmosphere that had made Morrison successful. It felt absolutely right. The restaurants would continue serving families and creating memories for future generations. Longtime employees would keep their jobs under new ownership that valued what we'd built together. The Morrison legacy of excellent food and genuine hospitality would survive and thrive, but Morrison family control would end forever. I signed the sale agreement on a Tuesday morning while Kevin and Jennifer attended a restaurant industry conference in Chicago. They were learning new ways to modernize Dad's outdated business model, while I was selling the business they thought they'd inherit. The business bank accounts required only my signature to close permanently. After all, I was still the sole legal owner of every asset they'd been treating like their personal inheritance fund. 40 years of carefully saved profits moved into my personal accounts within a single afternoon. Kevin and Jennifer's employment contracts contained termination clauses I'd forgotten about until Gerald reminded me during our planning session. Either party could end the arrangement with 30 days written notice. I drafted their termination letters that same afternoon, effective immediately after the restaurant's sale closed. They'd spent months plotting to force me out of my own company. Instead, they'd be cleaning out desks they'd never actually owned. The company credit cards that Rachel and Brad had been using for personal expenses were canceled with a single phone call. Their access to business accounts vanished instantly. The comfortable salaries they'd grown accustomed to would end the moment new ownership took control. But my most liberating decision was selling the family home, not from spite or anger, but from a genuine realization that I wanted something completely different for my remaining years. A young couple with 2 small children made an offer within hours of the listing going live. They loved the spacious kitchen and the backyard that would be perfect for swing sets and family gatherings. Patricia would have wholeheartedly approved. She'd always said houses were meant for growing families, not lonely widowers wandering through too much empty space filled with increasingly bitter memories. I was choosing freedom over the weight of maintaining a shrine to better times. Letting go of material possessions felt like shedding years of accumulated disappointment. I donated most of the furniture to the women's shelter downtown, pieces that Patricia had chosen with such care during our early years together. Her professional wardrobe went to families who needed appropriate clothing for job interviews and workplace success. Her jewelry became engagement rings for young couples who couldn't afford new ones, but deserved symbols of hope and commitment. I kept only three things from 4 decades of marriage and family: her wedding ring, one family photograph from before the bitterness began, and the plastic plate from the anniversary party. That plate deserved a place of honor in whatever came next. My new apartment near the Riverside Homeless Foundation was small, spotlessly clean, and perfectly suited for a man who'd finally learned the difference between owning possessions and possessing peace of mind. For the first time in years, I felt genuinely useful and deeply appreciated. Volunteering at the foundation showed me what authentic gratitude actually looked like. When I taught cooking classes in their community kitchen, people paid careful attention because they wanted to learn practical skills that would help them build better, more independent lives. When I shared stories about building a business from absolutely nothing, they listened intently because hope and practical advice meant everything to their futures. Nobody questioned my mental competence or suggested I was too old to contribute something genuinely valuable to their community. Maria, a young volunteer coordinator who'd grown up in foster care, treated me with the respect and appreciation my own biological children had systematically abandoned over the years. "You're like the father I never had," she told me one afternoon while we prepared dinner for 60 residents. "You actually listen to my ideas and make me feel like they matter," Maria continued, her eyes bright with the kind of genuine affection I hadn't seen in years. These people understood that every meal was a gift to be grateful for, rather than a right to be demanded. Every kind word was precious, because they'd experienced genuine hardship. Every skill shared was an investment in someone's potential for a better future. I was building real relationships based on mutual respect and genuine care rather than blood obligations or inheritance expectations. The foundation residents called me Grandpa Chuck, not because they had to, but because they genuinely wanted to show affection and respect. When I taught cooking classes, young mothers asked for advice and actually listened to the answers. Teenagers learning job skills treated me like the grandfather who believed in their potential for success. Frank, the foundation's director, valued my 40 years of restaurant experience. He asked for my input on everything from kitchen design to volunteer management. "Your expertise is exactly what we've been needing," he told me during a staff meeting. "You understand both the business side and the human side of feeding people." The final legal step was signing my completed will in Gerald's office, with two witnesses who had no connection to my biological family. Maria and Frank watched me sign the document that would give my life's work to people who fed the hungry, rather than people who'd fed me garbage. "Are you absolutely certain about these decisions, Mr. Morrison?" Gerald asked, fulfilling his professional obligation to confirm my wishes. I looked at the document that would transform my legacy from entitlement into earned gratitude. I've never been more certain of anything in my entire life. 3 days later, reality came crashing down on Kevin and Jennifer. Kevin called first, panic evident in his voice from the opening words. "Dad, we need to talk about the business immediately. Some of our accounts seem to be closed, and vendors are asking questions about payment authorizations." I was sitting in my small apartment, looking out at the garden where homeless families grew vegetables for the foundation's community meals. The morning was peaceful, with birds singing in the trees that Patricia would have loved to see. "What business?" I asked calmly, genuinely curious about his response. The silence stretched long enough that I could hear Kevin's breathing change from confidence to confusion to growing alarm. "Morrison's Family Kitchen. Our restaurants. The business we've been running together." "Oh, those restaurants," I said with casual indifference. "I sold them last Friday to Family First Dining. Didn't I mention that in an email?" The phone went so quiet I thought the call had dropped entirely. Then Kevin's voice came back, higher pitched and strained with disbelief. "You sold them? You can't sell them without consulting us. We're your business partners." "Check your employment contracts, Kevin. I'm the sole owner with 89% of shares. Your employees with management titles. There's a significant legal difference between those positions." I could hear him struggling to process this information. Managers could be replaced by new owners. Only owners made decisions about selling assets. He'd apparently forgotten which category he actually occupied in the business structure. Dad, you can't make major business decisions without consulting your family. We're your partners in this legacy. Legacy, I repeated thoughtfully. That's an interesting word choice considering recent events. Jennifer's voice suddenly joined the call, high and strained with panic. Dad, this is completely insane. You need to reverse this immediately before you destroy everything we've built together. Everything we built? I asked, genuinely curious about her perspective. Remind me exactly what you built, Jennifer. What did you create or sacrifice or risk to build Morrison's family kitchen? Silence. I need to do exactly what I've done, I continued calmly. Take control of my own assets and decide how they should be used, based on my values, not your expectations. The panic in their voices was escalating rapidly. We're coming over right now, Kevin announced with forced authority. We need to fix this situation before you make any more destructive mistakes. My new address is in the phone book, I told them. Look under Morrison, Charles, small apartment complex near downtown. You'll recognize it by the lack of luxury you've grown accustomed to. But I knew they'd find far more surprises waiting than just a smaller living space. An hour later, Kevin, Jennifer, Rachel, and Brad crowded into my modest apartment, looking around at my sparse furnishings with obvious confusion and growing alarm. No expensive furniture, no family heirlooms, no visible signs of the wealth they'd assumed I was hoarding for their eventual inheritance. Where's everything? Rachel demanded, her voice shrill with disbelief. Where are all the antiques? Patricia's jewelry collection? The family silver? The artwork? Donated to people who need them more than I do, I said simply, pouring myself coffee and not offering them any. Jennifer's face was flushed with anger and desperation. You had absolutely no right to give away family possessions without discussing it with us first. I had every legal right. They were mine to give. And that's when I played the recording that would end our relationship forever. 38 minutes of their conspiracy filled my small living room with the sound of their own voices, plotting my destruction. Their plans to have me declared incompetent. Their laughter at my anticipated humiliation. Their casual cruelty toward the man who'd sacrificed everything to give them comfortable, privileged lives. Jennifer's strategic planning. The anniversary party will demonstrate his incompetence publicly. Kevin's financial calculations. The business is worth at least $2.8 million. Rachel's gleeful anticipation. I've prepared something special for his dinner. Table scraps. Brad's cruel commentary. Time to teach him his place in this family. When the recording ended, the room was dead silent, except for the sound of their shocked breathing. Rachel tried to salvage the situation with manipulation. You can't do this to your own children, Chuck. We made mistakes, but we're still family. That has to count for something. Family, I repeated slowly, thinking about Maria's grateful smile when I taught her to make soup for 50 people. Family treats each other with dignity and respect. Family doesn't serve garbage to people they claim to love. I handed them each an envelope containing a copy of their revised inheritance, $1 each, specifically earmarked for scraps. You taught me my place in your version of family, I told them, as they stared at the legal documents with growing horror. Now you can learn yours in mine. Jennifer started crying, not tears of genuine remorse, but tears of someone who just realized their financial security had evaporated. Dad, please, we can work this out. We'll apologize publicly. We'll change our behavior. We'll do anything you want. Anything except treat me with basic human dignity before consequences forced your hand, I replied. Some lessons can only be learned through genuine loss. They could keep their desperate pleas and empty apologies. I was permanently done listening to their manipulation and false promises. Kevin tried a different approach, shifting to negotiation mode. Dad, let's be reasonable about this situation. We understand we made serious mistakes in judgment, but destroying our entire family over one bad evening doesn't serve anyone's interests. One bad evening? I asked, genuinely surprised by his characterization. Kevin, you spent months planning my humiliation. This wasn't a mistake. It was a deliberate campaign to break me down and steal my life's work. Brad attempted to redirect blame. We were just concerned about the business's future. Maybe we handled it poorly, but our intentions were good. Your intentions were to have me declared mentally incompetent so you could control my assets, I said, holding up the recording device. I have 38 minutes of evidence proving your real intentions. Rachel shifted to emotional manipulation. Think about Emma and Mason and Chloe. They don't deserve to suffer for our mistakes. They're innocent children who love their grandfather. You should have thought about my grandchildren before teaching them that elderly family members deserve disrespect and cruelty, I replied. You've been demonstrating for months that age means irrelevance and experience has no value. The door to my apartment stood open behind them, and I gestured toward it with quiet finality. You taught me exactly where I belonged in your version of family, I said calmly. I sat in that corner. I ate your scraps. I listened to your insults. Now you can learn where you belong in mine. I walked to the door and held it open. Goodbye, Kevin. Goodbye, Jennifer. I hope you find the dignity and gratitude you never learned from me. The door closed behind them with a soft click that felt like the end of 40 years of misplaced hope and unappreciated sacrifice. Over the following weeks, reality hit my former family with devastating precision. Kevin and Jennifer lost their jobs the moment Family First Dining completed their management review. The new owners had no interest in employing people who demonstrated such poor judgment and questionable family loyalty. Word spreads quickly in the restaurant industry about character issues. Rachel's credit cards were declined at Nordstrom when she tried to buy clothes for job interviews she couldn't secure without positive references. Brad panicked about their mortgage payments when he realized the consulting income he had relied on was entirely dependent on connections through Morrison's family kitchen. Houses that had been purchased with my financial backing went into foreclosure proceedings within 60 days. Cars leased through the business were repossessed by companies that no longer had contracts with new ownership. Private school tuition for my grandchildren went unpaid when their parents couldn't cover the substantial bills. Every assumption they'd made about their financial security and social position crumbled systematically over the course of a single month. The voicemails began arriving after about 6 weeks of reality. Jennifer crying, "Dad, we made terrible mistakes. We understand that now, but we're still your children. That has to mean something." Kevin attempting negotiation. "We can work this out reasonably. We'll apologize publicly for our behavior. We'll make changes. We'll do whatever it takes." Rachel trying manipulation. "Think about your grandchildren's futures. They shouldn't pay the price for our poor decisions." Brad offering false humility. "We understand now that we should have appreciated you more. We were wrong about everything." But their words fell on ears that had learned the difference between genuine remorse and panic-driven desperation. The community's reaction was swift and entirely predictable. Local news covered the sale of Morrison's family kitchen with genuine sadness about losing a beloved hometown business institution. But when word spread through social media about how Kevin and Jennifer had treated me at the anniversary party, public sympathy shifted decisively in my favor. Former employees shared stories with reporters about the younger Morrisons' entitled attitudes and dismissive treatment of longtime staff members. Customers remembered the grace and kindness that Patricia and I had shown over 4 decades, contrasted sharply with the arrogance they'd witnessed from our children. The Morrison family name, which had stood for warmth and community connection, became associated with greed and elder abuse. Kevin and Jennifer found themselves essentially unemployable in the local restaurant industry. No owner wanted to hire people known for betraying family loyalty and basic human decency. Their former friends quietly distanced themselves from the scandal. Their social standing evaporated, along with their financial security. Meanwhile, Gerald Whitman called with news that made me smile. My children were attempting to contest the will through a different attorney, claiming I'd been manipulated by unscrupulous advisors and that my mental state was questionable when I made major decisions. Dr. Henderson's comprehensive competency evaluation destroyed their legal arguments immediately. 4 hours of documented cognitive testing proving my mind was sharper than most people half my age. Their legal challenge lasted exactly one court hearing before being dismissed with prejudice. The judge noted that mentally competent adults have absolute rights to distribute their assets to any beneficiaries they choose, and that attempts to claim incompetence appeared motivated by greed rather than genuine concern for my welfare. But there was one final symbolic gesture I wanted to complete. I kept the cheap plastic plate as a reminder of how far I'd traveled from humiliation to dignity. Now I use that same plate every Tuesday when I serve meals at the Riverside Homeless Foundation. The plate that once held my degradation now holds hope for people who understand the value of kindness and respect. The irony isn't lost on me. That plastic plate, originally intended to diminish my worth, has become a symbol of purpose and genuine family connection. The residents at the foundation call me Grandpa Chuck, not because they have to, but because they genuinely want to show affection and appreciation. Maria introduces me to new volunteers as the best cooking teacher we've ever had and one of the kindest men you'll ever meet. These relationships are built on mutual respect and genuine care rather than blood obligations or inheritance expectations. No one expects money from me. No one questions my competence or suggests I'm too old to contribute valuable skills and experience. The plastic plate now serves meals made with love instead of obligation. I discovered the family I should have had all along. Young mothers at the shelter ask for cooking advice and actually listen carefully to the answers. Teenagers learning job skills treat me like the grandfather who believes wholeheartedly in their potential for success. Other volunteers my age share stories and wisdom without competing for position or future inheritance. Maria graduated from community college last month with a degree in social work. She credited our cooking classes with teaching her that small acts of consistent service create big changes in people's lives and communities. Frank asked me to help design a new commercial kitchen for expanded programming. My 40 years of restaurant experience suddenly mattered again, not because someone wanted access to my money, but because someone genuinely valued my knowledge and expertise. This is what family should feel like every day. Appreciation instead of entitlement, respect instead of manipulation, love instead of obligation. 6 months ago, I thought I was losing everything that mattered. Instead, I found people who remind me daily why feeding others has always been the most important work of my life. Blood doesn't make family. Love and respect do. I've updated my will one final time with additional specificity. The Riverside Homeless Foundation will receive everything, but now with a detailed directive. Create educational scholarships for young people aging out of foster care. Kids who understand what it means to build family connections from absolutely nothing. The sealed letter I wrote for my grandchildren explains my choices, without asking them to choose sides between generations. Emma, Mason, and Chloe will learn that their grandfather valued dignity over wealth, respect over inheritance, and earned love over blood obligations. Maybe they'll understand my decisions when they're older. Maybe they won't. But they'll know that someone in their family believed in earning love through consistent actions, not expecting it through biological accident. I spent 40 years feeding people who took my sacrifices for granted and treated my generosity like an entitlement program. Now I spend my remaining time feeding people who understand that every meal is a gift, every kind word is precious, and every person deserves basic dignity regardless of their circumstances. The plastic plate sits in my kitchen cabinet, waiting for next Tuesday's service. That plate reminds me daily that sometimes the smallest things teach the biggest lessons about human dignity. Yesterday, a new resident named Thomas arrived at the foundation. 73 years old, recently homeless, after his family took his Social Security checks and kicked him out for being too much trouble. His story sounded familiar. I served his first meal on my special plastic plate. This might look plain, I told him, as I handed over beef stew and fresh bread, but it represents something important. Sometimes people try to make us feel worthless, but our value doesn't depend on how others treat us. Thomas smiled for the first time since arriving. Thank you, sir. This is the best meal I've had in months. Not because the food was exceptional, but because it was served with dignity and respect. I spent decades building a restaurant empire to create family legacy. I discovered that real legacy comes from treating every person like they matter, regardless of what they can give you in return. The plastic plate has taught me the difference between being served and being honored. If this story resonated with you, there are more like it in my Quiet Justice series. Subscribe and hit the bell for notifications. Remember, respect is earned through actions, not inherited through blood. And sometimes the family we choose treats us better than the family we're born with.